Welcome, everyone, to the CDO magazine series of one-on-one interviews with CDOs, data leaders, and key influencers. I'm your host, Robert Lutton, Vice President, Sandhill Consultants, and I'm coming to you today from Toronto, Canada, working with the CDO magazine, the MIT CDO IQ Symposium, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Eric Bigelsen, who is the Senior Advisor and Head of the ESG work group at EDM Council. Sorry, too many ESGs there, Eric. Welcome, Eric.
Welcome. Thank you, Robert.
If I may, in your view, how would you see firms leveraging ESG data to make more sustainability-focused decisions?
The thing that's really interesting about ESG is, ESG is really nothing new. It's been conceptualized in the marketplace in various ways for the last 15 to 20 years. And companies have recognized that this is something important for their business, their organization, for the industry sector. And some companies have really gotten out ahead of adopting ESG or sustainable culture themselves, wanting to do the right thing for the environment, for society, for their employees. And it's not entirely about just what the regulators want. There are many other stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem as well. You have the investors, of course, you have the asset owners, but you have customers, you have employees, you have prospective employees. So generally, senior leadership in many companies have developed very specific ESG and sustainable cultures. Where they want to do things that are good and positive for the environment and good and positive for society as a whole. And also those companies tend to develop very good governance structures to sort of manage their business quite well.
And of course, nothing gets done without some type of regulation or enforcement of regulation. Can you tell us what roles you've seen governments playing in enacting ESG standards around the world to help with sustainability efforts?
The regulatory landscape, as I mentioned earlier, is evolving, and it's very dynamic, and not just the regulations themselves, but the standards organizations themselves as well. With their somewhat recent creation of the ISSB, International Sustainable Standard Board, that's related to the IFRS, and now the new European Sustainable Standard Board. Those are major initiatives, and we're going to see how those sort of pan out over the next several quarters. But clearly, they're establishing a very significant structure that's in place now, where, in fact, there was a group of really 16 or 17 different standards bodies, and there wasn't really much alignment and harmonization. So we're starting to see that happen now. But practically every government has significant initiatives around ESG. To make sure that their respective, countries, companies are in line and doing the right thing, as well as also recognizing where they are, in the overall global ecosystem. But clearly, it would seem that, whether it's Europe, the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada, the United States, all of them are driving towards more transparency, and ESG regulation, somewhat initially because of making sure that there's really not much in the way of greenwashing with their financial instruments that are being created, to make sure that if you're calling something, green, that in fact companies are doing something to meet that representation. But also everybody's driving hard to achieve the net zero requirements, for 1.5 degrees Celsius, by 2050. So really important guidelines and targets that have been set, and the regulations are being enacted by governments to really support the initiatives to move in that direction.
And I just learned another new term, greenwashing. So thank you for that, Eric. It's hard to believe that it's been, on sustainability has been on the kind of horizon for the last 20 years. But as the focus on ESG becomes more prominent over the last, obviously, several years, how are companies approaching the hiring process? And are there any specific roles that have evolved over the last few years as a result of the increased focus on sustainability efforts?
The landscape for employment is really interesting, and I can't say I'm a student of the employment landscape for ESG per se, but in conversations and different discussions and conferences that you attend, there definitely is a good number of people in that space already that actually have significant domain expertise. But there are woefully inadequate number of them to really stretch out and meet the needs across many organizations that are being affected by ESG. There are going to be opportunities for folks on the technical side from a measurement standpoint, but then there are going to be a lot of people involved with data management, data governance. Could be those involved with audit and assurance to make sure that when data is collected, that data is high quality and it's gone through some degree of audit and assurance purposes. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for additional people in the space, because effectively with what we see in Europe, some of the new regulations are going to affect about 11,000 companies with 500 more employees. My guess is the United States are going to have similar regulations that are going to affect practically every company imaginable that's a listed company or reports to some degree. And right now, there probably just aren't enough people to help support these companies, both reporting and disclosure purposes themselves, as well as everybody else being affected in the food chain, where they need to have people that are skilled, trained, understand, basic things like data management, because in the end, I said earlier, it's very much a data management problem. If once you measure technical issues, how do you pass that information along and do it in a very clear, consistent, transparent way?
And one of the roles of the chief data officer, which I know that the CEO magazine and the EDM Council supports, is obviously being that facilitator to make sure that they take these issues, these data management challenges, up to the forefront. But so for our attendees and listeners, keep an eye out for the future of ESG as a career growth path for senior leaders. Now, if I can ask, obviously, Eric, of the last 2 years, we've been in this pandemic. It looks like it's coming to end, fingers crossed. But have you seen in the past couple of years if there's been a different way that firms have approached ESG as a result of the pandemic of the last couple of years? And if so, from before, how has that changed?
Or for one area, we're not commuting into our offices anymore, and we're doing a lot more Zoom calls. But I think everybody, in not just Zoom, but all the other video conferencing platforms. But I think the pandemic has really impacted us in a very a significant way, where we're not dealing with sort of a normal environment right now. We're not being able to go to work and go to school the way we've been able to do that, or travel, or go to meetings, or see family and friends in a traditional social environment. So to the extent that I think there's a mindfulness around doing things more environmentally conscious, being more mindful from a social and societal standpoint. So I think this is sort of raising the bar at a very interesting time, when in fact many are focused on the climate related issues associated with ESG on the environmental side. There's definitely a lot more to be said about public health, sharing of information. So information is much more fluid, and people could make better decisions with information that's provided. So I do think it's really affected us in many, many profound ways.
Eric, we would really like to thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that we'll get the chance to come back and share your knowledge and experiences again with what's going on with the EDM Council in the future.
Thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And for our listeners, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews.